And now we have our wonderful presentation that you were all here for, a procurement transformation, a case study with the Las Vegas Valley Water District, presented by Coupa and CrossCountry Consulting. It is now my pleasure to introduce you to our wonderful speakers. First, we have Harpreet Narula. He is a Coupa practice lead at CrossCountry Consulting. Harpreet has over 15 years of experience in managing global, complex, and large-scale finance system implementations. He has been supporting Fortune 500 clients in managing their complex global implementations, and recently, Harpreet has been managing the implementations for cloud-based finance applications like Workday and Coupa for his clients. He brings a great blend of business, process, and technical expertise to support his clients. Harpreet received his bachelor's degree in finance and management and information systems at George Mason University. Next, we have Jim Haining. Jim is the Chief Procurement Officer at the Las Vegas Valley Water District. He has over 30 years of experience in supply chain management in both public and private sector organizations. Former employers include Clark County, Nevada, Sprint, and the Sierra Pacific Power Company. Jim has been involved in local government purchasing in Nevada for the last 15 years and served as a co-chair of the Nevada Public Purchasing Study Commission, a coalition of the public sector purchasing department in the state of Nevada. And in 2019, he was instrumental in modernizing the local government purchasing statute in the state of Nevada. And last but certainly not least, we have James Corner, the AVP of Corporate Sales at Coupa. James has been helping build Coupa's mid-market and growth business for the last 7 years. During this time, he has worked with hundreds of companies across all industries through their evaluation, implementation, and successful realization of meaningful business outcomes and measurable value for their organizations. Prior to Coupa, James spent a decade leading teams in renewable energy utilities and facility operation technology and software space, working with both private, public, and nonprofit organizations globally. Gentlemen, it has been a pleasure introducing you. We cannot wait to hear your presentation. At this time, I invite you to come on camera, and I will pass the torch to you.
Go off on mute. Thank you, Kayla, for that introduction. Really appreciate it. Thank you to everybody who has joined the webinar. I am Harpreet Narula, as Kayla mentioned, a partner here at CrossCountry Consulting. Alongside with me, we have James Corner from Coupa, as well as Jim Haining from Las Vegas Valley Water, the district. And we're very happy to obviously have this as an interactive webinar that we really want to make sure we get a lot of questions from the audience, but more importantly, hopefully provides learning opportunity for the folks that are on the call here today. A very quick overview about CrossCountry Consulting. At the end of the day, we are a full-blown advisory firm. We really offer services around helping support clients from an accounting perspective, from risk and compliance perspective, from procurement transformation perspective, and obviously we are a Coupa implementation partner from a technology perspective. We do have offices across many of the regions here in the U.S., as you can see on the screen. But in addition, we also have offices, as we learned somebody was from South Africa, so we actually have an office in South Africa, as well as in Ireland, in Canada, the Philippines, and we are growing rapidly. So far, about 850 people, but growing as I said rapidly, and hopefully we'll hit the 1,000 mark here shortly. We've been overall delighted to be presenting with Jim and James today, but again, as I said, please keep the questions coming on the chat, so we're happy to take on those questions as they come through over here in a few minutes. All right, hopefully I can get the slides to work here for me. There we go. James?
Excellent. Yes, thank you everyone for joining us. Really excited to have the opportunity to participate in today's webinar. I'll be very brief so we can turn it over to the star of the show, my man Jim Haining from Las Vegas Valley Water District. But for those of you not familiar with Coupa, we're a software company. We provide a comprehensive business spend management platform. We work with over 3,000 customers today, from pre-revenue startups to half of the Fortune 500, as well as federal and public sector customers like Las Vegas Valley Water. The core of Coupa's solution is really geared around helping businesses manage all of their spending, from purchasing to invoicing to expenses, all the way through to payments. And then we also have applications for strategic sourcing, managing contracts, risk and supplier performance, as well as some others that you'll see here. But I think really what we pride ourselves on at Coupa is really focusing on our core values of ensuring customer success first and foremost, with a focus on results and driving the realization of the goals from all of our customers' transformation efforts here, and striving for excellence in everything that we do every day. We are a global company, and we, while the platform that Coupa provides can do a lot, we've also really built Coupa as an open platform. So there's many other systems that come into play when you're buying things, when you're working with your suppliers, and Coupa has an open architecture, and we can connect with many different banks, different solutions, as you see above. But really what we're grounded on is our customer community and all of the folks, who are already in our community, like Jim and those of you who hopefully will join our community. But really, we do want to take what we've learned and establish those best practices and share them in an open, honest, and authentic manner. So really excited for y'all to hear the presentation today. And again, just thank you for the opportunity to be here with you.
Yep.
So, Jim Haining, I am with the Las Vegas Valley Water District, and we are a not-for-profit public utility founded in 1954, and we support about 1.6 million people within the Las Vegas Valley Water District service territory, but we also provide water to the other water purveyors in Southern Nevada to about 2.4 million residents. And I kind of like that graphic. It shows you the city of Las Vegas, but underneath it, we have about 7,000 miles of pipes and about 50 reservoirs and pumping stations that surround the valley to provide water to the people who live here, plus the millions of visitors, which probably include almost all of you on the call today, who come here to Las Vegas to play. We have about 1,400 employees, and our annual spend's right around $500 million. So that's a little bit about us.
Yeah, we only come to Las Vegas to drink the water. Just putting that out there. That's the main objective.
That's right. That's all you want to do when you come to. You don't want to drink anything else when you come to Vegas. But just to let you know, we started our partnership with CrossCountry back in 2019 when we selected Coupa as our procure-to-pay system that we were going to implement, and we kicked off our project to roll out Coupa in January of 2020. So let's go to the next slide, Harpreet. So when we went through the process, we went through the full RFP process and evaluated several different systems. And we selected Coupa as our procure-to-pay system that we were going to go forward with. I've been doing this for well over 30 years. And frankly, during the demos and when I was looking at the system, I go, no, it can't be that easy. I had never seen a procurement system that was so streamlined, so easy. So I don't know, it was just simple. But it truly was once we got it implemented. The Coupa modules that we implemented are the procure-to-pay system, Invoice Smash, which has to do a bit around some invoice automation, the expense module, the analytics module, the contract lifecycle management standard module, supplier information management or SIM module in the Open Business Network. We have lots of different integrations into various systems within our organization. And the one thing that is cool about Coupa is the open API and the ability to easily integrate with most systems, especially more modern systems. It's very simple to integrate. I have a couple old systems that took a little bit to get the integrations to work, but it wasn't from the Coupa side, it was from the other system side, but we have them all working today. But, some of our initiatives were centralization of all of our systems into one application. The ability to do mobile approvals was very important, and to be able to scale easily as our invoice volume or just our purchasing volume grew. And we were able to adjust our purchase processes to support best practices as opposed to what we were doing. We had an old system we've been using for the last 20 plus years, and we used to do things because that's the way it had always been done. It wasn't necessarily best practice. But let's go to the next slide.
So Jim, maybe before we go to the next slide, maybe I'll ask you a quick question around here. I think for the district, this is a very massive transformation project from what you guys were doing in the past to obviously leveraging Coupa and the functionality around this area. But the timing was not maybe the best. We obviously, as probably everybody would agree, everybody thought the world was ending in March 2020. We had started the project already in January, and we had kicked off the project, and we were like, oh, we probably have to stop the project. I would love for you to maybe talk to the audience in terms of the obstacles that were presented, and then how collectively we all pivoted to figure out how can we still get the project going. If you can opine on that a little bit, please.
Absolutely. Yeah. We started this project like the 3rd or 4th week of January 2020, and we all know what happened in mid-March 2020. All of a sudden, my team was all sent home, and we weren't prepared to be working from home, but we were all sent home. And also, our consultants that we were working with from CrossCountry, they were all grounded back in DC. Where they were all based. And I thought for sure the whole project was dead or going to be put on hold for a significant amount of time. But fortunately, our company had we had gone through the blueprinting and process mapping process, and we were almost complete with that when this all happened. So we'd had enough face-to-face time to be able to understand one another, and we had made a lot of our decisions around our new process transformations and the blueprint mapping that we were going to be doing. And we had just implemented Teams, but no one really knew how to use Teams. I mean, from our point of view back then, because we were all always face-to-face. But within a couple days, we pivoted from everybody being on site to everybody being remote. And here we are 3 years later, and my team is remote 75% of the time. We have a 4-day work week. We only come on 1 day a week. This is my day a week on site, but and we were able to keep this whole project going. We were able to come in on time and under budget. And frankly, I think we were much more effective with this whole implementation, working remotely, than we ever would have been attempting to be on site, and the training went much better being able to train remotely than trying to get people into a room on computers as we were doing our training. So.
Thank you, Jim. I think that's really important, right? I mean, as we all had an episode where we all thought we don't know what the next steps are going to be in March 2020. And I think it's important that the entire team from the district, Coupa and CrossCountry, were able to pivot to do much more, obviously, virtual aspects. But I think the big thing that really stood out to me personally when I was physically on the project with Jim is there was a trust level that was built within the team for the first few weeks. And that really helped us to pivot to going virtual and making sure we can continue to manage the project virtually. And as Jim alluded to, I think it actually made the project be better, because when we're all in the office, as we all know, when we're in person, there's pros and cons, but there are sometimes more distractions. People come to your office, or you're going to lunch or whatever it might be. Now we're all sitting at home, and it actually we had much more focused attention on the meetings. And I think that helped us to be a bit more prescriptive on what we needed and make the design decisions and help with the integration build and all those aspects that you run into the project. And I think that's one of the main reasons why we were able to continue to be successful on the project, even though it was a new learning initiative probably for the district. CrossCountry had been doing a lot of remote consulting before as well, but I think it was a good collaboration at the end of the day between both parties.
It was.
All right, we'll move to the next slide. Jim, I would love for, again, I know you kind of alluded to it a little bit, right? That Coupa implementation was a huge transformation opportunity for the district. There's various systems, and we'll talk about that in a few slides about the integration architect that you guys had with Oracle and the various inventory systems and whatnot. And obviously you talked about the ease of use, and I know you're going to talk about that a little bit more, but I would love to hear from your perspective of what were the key drivers that really helped you guys transform from a pre-Coupa to where you are today?
Well, the biggest, so I've been here at the district a little over 6 years. And when I was first hired, my CFO came to me and says, CFO and IT came and said, Jim, we have to put in a new procurement system. We were using an old system that we had cobbled together. So we were using our asset management system as a purchasing system and had developed 25 custom programs that attempted to get this old system to work as a purchasing system. And everything was custom and all was custom written by our IT department. And they were having a tough time keeping up with the maintenance. We needed a system that was a single procurement system that could integrate to all of our old systems. It was extremely cumbersome. It was difficult to operate. It was always going down. They were constantly having to restart different programs almost every day to keep the thing running. So it was extremely fragmented and very labor intensive. So when I started, there were 16 people in the procurement department, and we are now down to 14 people in the procurement department and 3 people in AP. I'm down 2 people, AP's down 1 person, and that is because the processes are so streamlined now that we're not having to, we don't need the people to do it. And now my people, instead of sitting there and working on POs all day, can now do value added work, working on contracts and getting contracts in place. And Coupa's taking up that slack for us. But you can see our kind of pre-Coupa model, all the various different swim lanes we had and everything going back and forth. It was extremely convoluted, and it's extremely streamlined today.
I think that obviously reminds me, Jim, of a lot of the conversations that we had early on in the project where pre-Coupa, I'm going to call it that, there was a lot more, hey, let's do it more tactical procurement aspects versus being more strategic. And one of the key areas that I know of the team collaboratively focused on is to make sure that our business processes, as we think about the future, is going to be how do we really look that we still need to do tactical things, every organization does, but how do we really free up the procurement team and the AP team, our overall finance team, to be a bit more strategic, to get better visibility, to get better reporting, to look at the transactions that they should really be focused on from an RFP perspective, or look at go for bids, right? Versus every single transaction that they were previously looking at. And on top of that, I think the bigger aspect, which these slides probably don't represent, is technology team. I mean, huge props to the technology team at the district, because without that team, this project would not have been successful, as well as Jim, because they did the programs, as Jim talked about, the 25 custom programs. Again, we had to make sure we knew what those programs did so we could figure out what the current business processes were. Not that we wanted to replicate them, but we do want to understand what the current processes are to figure out how do we navigate towards better practices at the end of the day for district, what makes sense. But we had an amazing IT team at the district that really knew the programs, did amazing development, and I think really helped us to be successful at the end of the day. And Jim, I would love for you to maybe talk a little bit about that as well in terms of the collaboration between the 2 teams on that area as well.
Yeah, flip to the next slide. It kind of shows what's going on. So as we went through this journey to transform and implement this new system, we were able to easily, we have like 26 or 28 different integrations between Coupa and different systems at the district. You can see a lot of them there on this slide, and I know it's kind of an eye chart, but we have a lot of different integrations that are going back between Coupa and our Oracle financial system, between Workday and Coupa, between our bank and Coupa for P-card transactions, from our asset management system. We have requisitions and information going back and forth for everything that's in our inventory system. We buy a lot of inventory. And then we have, budget data that is going back and forth. So it was critical that our IT team are the one that wrote all of these integrations. And they quickly learned our business in procurement. They weren't familiar with it because no one had been touching a lot of this stuff for years. And we had an extremely successful integration or project because the integrations were built right, and CrossCountry team was able to help guide our integration team as they built all of these integrations. We only had one integration that we had to outsource and have someone else build that, and that was our Workday integration. But other than that, our IT team did all this stuff. So as we went through this journey, and I see some of the questions about hosted catalogs. So when we first went live, we had about 3,500 suppliers that we brought over. We didn't bring over everything, only suppliers that we used in the past 3 years. So I didn't want to bring all that data in. We have over 600 users currently using Coupa today. We have 22,000 plus hosted catalog items. Now, those are our inventory items that reside within Coupa. And so when my replenishment recs come from my inventory system, they're not sending all the information about the item. They're sending quantities, unit of measure, the item number, ship to location, and need by date. Everything else is picked up in Coupa. And if the stuff's on contract, just as soon as the requisition comes in and is approved, Coupa places all the orders. If it's not on contract, then my team takes over and completes that. When we went live, with our contract with CrossCountry, punch out catalogs, very important, especially in Coupa. I mean, and this is brand new. We had never seen punch out catalogs, and we thought that this was going to be extremely difficult. So we had in our contract that CrossCountry was going to do our first 5 punch out catalogs, but I made sure that as they were building those and we were going through that process, that we were in those and saw how it was done. And it was like, what the heck? This is so simple. Within Coupa, we then, my team, and not my IT team, this is my Coupa administrator and myself, we figured out how to do this, and we've built the other 16, we're up to 21 punch-out catalogs, and we were able to build those all ourselves. And as long as the supplier has the capability to do punch-outs, being able to build it, you don't need a consultant, you don't need to be a programmer to develop and set up the punch-outs at Coupa. It was just super simple. We've already talked about how we've delivered this project pretty much 100% remote. But it's also, now, here at the Water District, we didn't have the great resignation that everybody else had during COVID. We had the great retirement. When I first came into the organization, my procurement department was very gray, let's say it that way. And I had an amazing number of people. In fact, I think I've hired 10 people in the 6 years that I've been here. So most of my staff has turned over because of retirement. But our transaction volume has increased while we have decreased numbers because of how simple the whole and how streamlined the process is within Coupa. So
I think it's
any
also maybe,
questions?
Jim, I think to add on to this one, right, is I think with the approach that we took for punch outs, which you alluded to, was a very similar approach on the integrations. We leveraged, I'm going to call it Agile-esque approach, not a true Agile, but really a similar approach from Agile, really educating the district's IT team on how the integrations need to work, getting the foundation set up. Once the foundation was done, they knew what to do, and that actually helped the rest of the integrations move a lot faster. And one of the other elements, I know, Jim, you're going to talk about this, is around how we manage the testing as well. I think it's coming up in the next few slides as well, but that's going to be really important to touch on. But Jim, I think before we go there, I think it's important for you, as we started the project, there was a rationale that we did about looking at, because we were all remote, right? COVID had kind of taken us out from the face-to-face aspects. But there was a decision that collectively was made to say, how do we actually roll out the platform? And the decision was made to get expenses in first, with following the rest of the applications that we had on the previous screen at a later date. So maybe, Jim, if you can talk a little bit about that as we move over to the next topics as well.
Sure. So we were doing all of our P-card reconciliation in the bank's platform. It was extremely cumbersome. There was a lot of constant administration that had to be done by our team to get people logged in, to remind them to go out and reconcile their P cards and everything. And so as we were building this, we decided we had the P card reconciliation portion, which we're doing in the expense module of Coupa. We're not using it for full T&E. We're just using it right now for P cards. It was all built, and the integration between the bank was coming in daily, and we go, we're going to try this. So about 4 months before go live, we decided to go live on P card transactions and P card reconciliation within the Coupa platform. And we did this, number one, because it was ready, but number two, we started to get a lot of our users, we have about 250 P-card users, used to the Coupa platform. But instead of the full procure to pay, entering recs and all that stuff, it's just going in and reconciling their P-cards. And we thought it was going to be a bit more difficult, but the transition went seamlessly because the process within Coupa was so much easier than what they had been doing in our bank system. So there was a really high acceptance rate and people were using it. So when we went live in March, we went live with that in November. When we went live March 1st with the full procure to pay, people were very familiar with the with the process in using Coupa. So it went extremely well. And there's a question out there I just want a quick answer about the punch outs. So which punch outs did we enable? Well, I'll just quick list them. Allied Electronics, Amazon, Brady Industries, that's a janitorial firm, CDW, Codale Electric, Dell, Eppendorf Labs, Fastenal, Fasteners, Fisher Scientific, Global Industrial, Grainger, Graybar, Home Depot, Lindy, Lowe's, McMaster-Carr, MSC Industrial Supply, Napa Auto Parts, Staples, and VWR. So, a lot of our main, MRO type suppliers. And they're used extensively and procurement's not involved and it's working extremely well.
I think one of the points that maybe I'll elaborate on, there's a question around P cards as well. We'll talk about that right after this. But I think one of the important parts, as Jim alluded to, is the decision to go with T&E technically for P cards earlier. That was, again, a way to approach change management, right? We really made sure that we could get the application in the hands of the users, and we got them starting to use the application. And since it was easier, there was a lot more buy-in, and people were looking forward to, hey, when is the next phase coming out? A really, I think, intelligent move on the team's part to make sure we can get the application out in the hands of the users as quickly as we possibly can. And we actually got a lot of buy-in because they're like, oh, this is a lot easier. So they were looking forward to now the new process that was, again, going to come up in the next few months as well. And I think the other part that was really key from an overall change management perspective is the way the district aligned their internal resources. And this is going to be important for anybody looking at implementations. I'm sure it's pretty common sense, but it's very important because that was one of the areas why we were successful. One was having an advocate, being Jim, as the key lead and decision maker on the project. Sometimes we have project managers on projects that can't make effective decisions. This was not the case here. Jim was making the decisions and timely decisions and making sure we kept to scope. We kept to exactly to make the system easy, keeping the goals in mind of the organization. And that was all, again, credit to Jim in that scenario. On top of that, we had the STERCO members. The STERCO members were from all parts of the different businesses within the district. And they were very involved. Every single month we had a STERCO, and with some amazing questions that came in to throw us off at sometimes, but more importantly, it really showed that they were involved in the process, but more importantly, were involved in making sure that we were going to be successful in this deployment. They were helping us mitigate any potential roadblocks. They were making sure the communications were going out to their relevant team members and making sure that we got the right people allocated when it came time to test as well. And that, again, really was very important for us to be successful for a very large transformation aspect for the district. And I think without some of these elements, there's a lot more, we would not have been successful. The other thing that both the teams, the district and cross-country, really focused on is, we call it training, but training the end users, right? Critical. A lot of hand-holding, making sure people got to it, and literally said, hey, bring in your real transaction so we can really make you do it while we're watching you. A lot of hand-holding, a lot of office hours, the different concepts that you can imagine were involved from a change perspective. But on top of that, there was a ton of communication for internal, different departments, all the users that you have, but also external, being your suppliers. Really a thoughtful strategy from a change perspective, again, that helped us to be a full help manage the transformation that we did at the district overall here as well. So really want to, Jim, there was a question around P cards. Which banks do you guys use? I forgot that. If you don't mind, maybe answering that question for the team.
Yeah, we use Wells Fargo for our P cards.
Thank you.
And there was a question about, do we have separate T&E? So T&E is all done through another system because they implemented that about a year before we started Coupa. So we have not moved that over into Coupa yet, but T&E is in a different system. And then P cards are in Coupa. So
Jim, I know we kind of talked about this a little bit. Sorry, maybe you're going to get to it, but talk about the whole blueprinting phase. I know you were not the biggest fan of that early on, but I think we helped change your mind on that, and maybe you can talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, the blueprinting phase to me was like, it was. I was like, this is just a disaster, and I don't know. I didn't enjoy it as we started, but as we got into it, because there was a lot of conflict when we went into it as well with the different departments that were in there. And I was like, this is just a complete waste of time. And I think we spent about close to 6 weeks in blueprinting and process mapping. But as we went through it, we were, thanks to the guidance of my consultants from CrossCountry, we got through it. And we decided, and one of the whole mantras as we started this project is we were not going to keep old broken processes. We were going to change them we were going to have our processes fit the software, not change the software to fit old antiquated processes. Just because we've been doing it doesn't mean that that's the way it should be done. And as we went through the blueprinting and process mapping, it helped us realize how things could be done and how more streamlined things could be. And as they documented that, we had to go back to that a few times because we had other departments come in and say, no, we got to have it this way. And we go, but you were in the room and we had it all documented. You were in the room that this is how we decided this whole process was going to work. And when we did that, we resolved a whole lot of issues that started to come up as we were doing testing and playing with the system. But another thing that was extremely important in any big transformation is change management. And fortunately, we had written into our contract with CrossCountry that they were going to lead and be in charge of a lot of our change management for us. And they did a fabulous job. We had a lot of change management. We had a lot of meetings. We informed a lot of people all the time throughout this project, including our steering committee. So we had a project steering committee, and there were individuals within the organization that I knew from prior experience would be a little more possibly difficult. So I made sure that they were on the steering committee so that they knew what was going on and they knew why it was going on, and they were be able to have their feedback early in the process throughout the entire project. And that made a world of difference. So if you go into a project like this, make sure you get maybe some of the detractors onto the steering committee, and that will help. Another super important process that CrossCountry brought to us for this project was we created a detailed system integration testing, where before we went into user acceptance testing, we had already done system integration testing, and we found 99% of our bugs in the integrations and the problems in our systems integration testing before we ever went to UAT. So when we got into user acceptance testing, everything was pretty much perfect. Rarely did we have to change much, and that was extremely critical in the success of this project. And finally, one of the most important parts of any kind of transformation project is your training. And one of the things that we did, we created quick reference guides. And a quick reference guide is a quick 1 or 2 pager on how to do a process, like how to enter a requisition, how to do a receipt, how to do a return receipt. And I think we developed about 30 of these things, and most of those, the template was all developed by CrossCountry, and they did most of this as we went through. And it made it so that training is super simple. So today, we've been live a little over 2 years. When a new person needs to be introduced to Coupa and be trained, it takes about 5 or 10 minutes to train them. We show them how to get into Coupa. We show them the basic maneuvering, where to go, and we show them where all the quick reference guides are listed on our intranet. And we rarely have questions. We rarely need to do much training because the system is so intuitive compared to other systems that we have. So, and thanks to CrossCountry for helping us get to this point, because they're the ones that brought this to us. And we continue to create new quick reference guides today as we get into a process that just needs a step-by-step explanation.
Jim, I think it's so important. Thank you, obviously, for the compliments, but I think it's an important part, right? As Jim alluded to, we had change management as our part of our contract, and we're happy to obviously. But I think one important thing that hopefully everybody who's going through transformation or thinking about transformation, it has to be collaborative. Because from an external perspective, there are certain things that we can do really, really well. But it cannot be that you can rely just on an external team that's going to 100% own everything, because that's a recipe for disaster. Speaking as a consultant, hey, we're charging a lot of money. Not the right answer, right? Because it's important making sure that at the end of the day, you do have to have ownership. You know your people, you know your culture, and you need to make sure that there's I'm going to say, skin in the game from an internal perspective. And that is what Jim really provided, again, beautifully on the project to make sure we were successful. The other thing, and we all, again, I've gone through a gazillion projects, probably everyone on the call here, we always look at how can we shrink timelines? How can we shrink timelines? One of the key things that we will advocate for is don't skim timing or time on change management because it's critical. Second thing is on testing. SIT, the way we did it, it was absolutely critical and was part of our change management strategy. Because if we can figure out all the issues up front, as we get users, and we had a couple of users involved in SIT just to make sure we can get they're helping us test it out. But when we get the other folks to provide in terms of testing, it really provides a better experience for them because they're like, oh, the system actually works. It actually works exactly how it's documented. And they were actually happy to use it based on everything that we had said from a training perspective or any of the QRGs or quick reference guides, etc. Really, really important to making sure those are not the areas that you want to cut. Think about other options for cutting, which is always difficult, but there are probably other areas that you can look at in an organization, but those are very critical for us to be successful. And one of the other elements that Jim and the Stairco always kept in mind is the strategic goals. Every single time we're working through it and anything that comes up, let's make sure that if somebody, there's always a few people that want, oh, I need this different because that's how I've done it for 20 years or 30 years. Thank you, great. But let's look at our strategic goals from an organization perspective. And that is where, if those things came up, we obviously pushed back where necessary, but then also told them the reasons and rationale why we need to go here and explain that to them. And if there was still an obstacle, take that up to Sterico. Hopefully they can help us to mitigate that roadblock. But overall, really, really important to keep everybody grounded on the strategic goal that you're trying to achieve with the transformation. And that, I think, was, again, done very nicely on this project, collaboratively with the team from the district, as well as CrossCountry Consulting and Coupa, just to make sure we all kept in sync and making sure we were all kind of driving the project the same way. And I think that was, again, another part of the successful nature of the project that we all had. Jim, anything else to add?
There's just one thing I want to add. One of the things as we went through this, and those of you who are in procurement and have been in procurement, you always had this dream of no PO, no pay. Always want a purchase order. And we could have done that in this, but as we went through the process in our blueprinting and we were talking about, oh, let's go no PO, no pay. My consultants said, okay, we can do that, Jim, but here's another way to do that without having to create a PO. Because do you really need a PO for every service and then have to have it receipted for and all that stuff? We don't do no PO, no pay. Now, that was a huge change for our organization because we were kind of there, but not quite. But our services are no longer no PO, no pay. I mean, we are able to put contracts together and we can route invoices for approval attached to a contract and get approval for them, similar to a requisition. And while the change was a bit of a change for some of our people, I don't think we could ever go back to some other way. It would be extremely difficult because it has become so simple and so easy for our people. Anyway.
I think, Jim, that's a great point. I'd forgotten about that, but I think it's very important, right? And I think one of the key things that we did early on is, we use a consulting lingo, unfortunately, but it's the by-channel analysis, looking at where is the spend coming from, what are the different channels, and then coming up with a strategy that won't make sense. A lot of companies say no PO, no pay, but if you really kind of go underneath, there's always some that are non-PO, because I'll take a simple example. Utilities, majority companies maybe don't even create POs, or it's PO, which is, I call it a fake PO that you might be doing just to capture the cost. Perfectly fine. There are ways you can do it, but does it make sense? And those are the things and discussions that we want to have whenever we're going through an implementation. And that's where the spend analysis is really critical to make sure where are you spending dollars, where are the areas that we should be looking at to say this should go towards a P card or a virtual card or through a PO process or a non-PO process, coming up with the various options that might be beneficial for you as an organization based on where you are, and also look at the efficiencies you can gain by those different options. And that's kind of what Jim was alluding to for some of their services, where we looked at contract backed versus a true PO backed.
And through this whole process, I now have 100% of my spend going through Coupa.
I think that's amazing, because now you have the spend and the reporting and the visibility, and even your finance guys, your CFO, I know, has a lot of reporting to manage their finance functions as well. And I think I still remember being in the room, I think at one point, or in the call, I can't remember now exactly, but I think the CFO said this is one of the projects that has gone successful at the district after a long while, and they were very, very appreciative of the collaboration that we had with the district. So thank you, Jim, for your leadership in that role as well. All right. That is all the slides that we really had to present in terms of wanting to walk you guys through. We hope that, number one, I want to first of all, before I know we'll get towards the end, really want to say thank you to Jim as being an amazing customer, but really advocate of CrossCountry Coupa, but also talking about the journey that they went through and the transformation. Thank you to James from Coupa, just talking about the Coupa functionality and being a great partner with us. And obviously, thank you to SIG for obviously hosting this. But Kayla, we're going to probably hand it back to you in terms of how the Q&A works, I'm assuming now.
That's right. I'm here. It looks like, I know there was a couple questions from the audience, and Jim was already on it and he answered, but we do have a few more here that I would just like to ask to you all. Jim, this is for you. Can you talk about the catalogs that LVVW has enabled, and what was it like to add new catalogs to Coupa after going live?
Well, I'm assuming catalogs or punch outs. We created a couple internal catalogs, but for office chairs and for coffee products for our facilities people to order. But for the punch outs, I've talked about that. And it was super simple. Once, we went live, we've added another 16 since go live. And the process is very simple from our side. Like I said, you don't need to have programmers involved. Your Coupa administrator can do it. It's really very simple and straightforward. Just a lot of testing with your supplier. And because the heavy lift is on the supplier side. If they can't do punch out catalogs, you can't do it. So anyway, there's a question, do I use OpenBuy? I do not use OpenBuy. And the reason being, until Coupa can content group my items, my item records, I can't do OpenBuy because I don't want to show my people how to go search for things in Coupa and have them pull up inventory items that they have to go to the warehouse and buy. They don't have, all they have to do is go over to the warehouse and check it out. They don't have to put in requisitions for that, but I can't do OpenBuy. And I'm trying to work with Coupa to get them to be able to content group item records.
Thank you, Jim. Harpreet, I have one for you. What services does CrossCountry provide related to procurement, which are not Coupa implementation related?
Okay, well, thank you for that question. So from an overall perspective, as I mentioned earlier, we are a full-fledged advisory firm, but specifically to procurement, we're helping companies from an overall procurement transformation. Think about org. So if you have an organization, you have the right people or the wrong people. We look at how you're set up and help set up the organization structure for you. We obviously help from a change management perspective, which again, we did for the district, but obviously a big portion of it. We also help companies from a sourcing perspective where we can tackle on specific sourcing opportunities for certain organizations, specifically on the indirect space. And overall, we're also now looking at helping companies that are thinking about strategy, system selection around the procurement space to say, which should we be implementing? Sorry, James, but looking at all the other players out there, obviously we want them to pick Coupa, but obviously we help companies out select, making sure they make the right selection if there's a selection that they want to do.
Thank you for that. Another question here, Jim, I believe this is for you, is how does LVVW train new hires at the district?
I kind of answered that, but basically, my Coupa administrator sets them up in Coupa, has a little 10-minute call to quick just show them, you know, on a Teams call, show them how to use the system and reference them to the quick reference guide. And we rarely have to do any follow-up because the quick reference guides are detailed on step-by-step how to do something. And the system is so intuitive.
Wonderful. Thank you. One more question for you too. What is the most unique item that LVVW has purchased using Coupa?
Yeah, Harpreet loves this one. As a water district, most water districts do not also run cattle and sheep ranches, but we have a very large cattle and sheep ranch that we operate up in northern Nevada on a big ranch, so we could have those water rights. And as such, the most unique thing we purchase is bull semen for artificial insemination of the cattle up there. So, I mean, where else would you have to buy something like that? But
that's great. I love it so much. Well, we just have a couple minutes left, so I will once again ask the audience if you have any other questions for our wonderful speakers here, please feel free to drop them in the comments or in the Q&A. Jim, that's great. You surprised me with that answer there.
I surprised everybody, and that's why Harpreet's laughing on mute.
That is not one I'd heard. That's amazing. All the things you have to do. That's incredible.
Yep. Yeah.
Well, if we don't have any further questions, I will go ahead and just thank you all for being here today. We certainly appreciate it. This will conclude our Power Hour webinar today. So thank you, Coupa. Thank you for CrossCountry Consulting for being here today. And Jim from Las Vegas Valley Water District, we appreciate all of your insight. Just a reminder to everybody here watching our webinar, you will receive a recorded session later in the week. So be sure to follow up with that email. And then also you will have a survey when you close out of this webinar. We appreciate your feedback. It helps us improve and keep growing. So thank you everyone for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye.